Okay, I think we can go ahead and get started here. Thanks everyone for joining our webinar today regarding mobile first approaches with online communities. We're very proud to have Ray Poynter here with us. He's the founder of the Future Place and New MR. For those of you who don't know, I'm sure Ray needs no introduction, but I'll give him a short one here. Ray's the author of the Handbook of Online and Social Media Research, the Handbook of Mobile Market Research, editor of Isomar's book, Answers to Contemporary Research Questions. And in addition to many other things, Ray often finds himself, I think, at the intersection of what fun, work, and discovery. Is that right, Ray? Something like that?
Yeah.
Yeah, so he's with the new MR. I'm Dan Fleetwood. I'm president of QuestionPro Communities, and we're excited today to present to you mobile first approaches with online communities. I think we'll have some fun. You'll learn a lot and be able to take actionable items back to your communities. A few housekeeping items today. We will plan this for about 45 minutes. Ray will give his presentation. I'll say a few things at the end, and there will be time for live Q&A. So during the Q&A, I'll be kind of feeding the questions. So make sure that you use the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. You should see a Q&A, and then you can type in your questions there. I'll get them. We may not get to all of them, but rest assured, if we don't get to your questions, we'll be sure to follow up via email at the end of the webinar. Again, keep a lookout for in your email. We'll be sending out a recorded version of this as well. So Ray, without further ado, I will pass it on to you.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you for that introduction. And hello, everyone. And here's the agenda that I'm going to run through today. So a little bit about the context, because if we want to think about the future and where we're going and what is possible, we need to know what sort of environment we're working in. Then where are communities in 2018? And then we start to bring that together. So what does mobile first mean? What have we gained? What have we lost? Where are we going? What about going beyond just surveys? What about passive and non-conscious? And then if we're going to have online communities, we need to think about the mobile management of those communities. And then I'm going to hand back to Dan. So this is a little bit about the context and the background. And the first of my slides is looking at the USA, and it's from probably the best data source in the United States, and therefore probably the largest best data source there is, Pew Research Center, looking from 2000 to 2018, high quality research to find out what devices people have. And that solid blue line at the top, that is cell phone. Some degree of mobile phone or cell phone, and that's getting really, really close to 100% of the adults who can be reached, who are not living in a hut somewhere up in the Dakotas or something. People have a cell phone. And the red dotted line is smartphone. So it's been coming up rapidly. It's nearly at 80%. It's well on the way towards that cell phone line, but there is a gap. Nearly 20% between those who have a cell phone and those who have a smartphone. Now we've got a very interesting line. We've got sort of a light blue, turquoise, dashed and dotted line, and that's having a PC. And that peaked around 2010, 2012, and has been slowly coming down, and it's now behind smartphone. So yes, you can't reach everybody with a smartphone, but you can reach more people than you can reach using PCs, laptops, Macs, and so on. The purple dotted line, that's pretty interesting too. That's tablet computers, really moving along strongly, and probably over the next few years going to catch up with PCs. We are going to see an increasing number of people over the next 5 to 10 years who give up using a laptop, who give up using a PC because they don't need word processing, so they don't need a keyboard, so they don't need that old sort of stuff. And that's going to make some really interesting changes for how we communicate with people. Now let's look at the global picture. So the blue bars, we read those on the left-hand side, active mobile broadband subscriptions, because if you want to know how many people in a country have got a usable smartphone, then really what you're looking for is the mobile broadband subscription. If they have a smartphone, but they don't have a mobile broadband subscription, they have to go to somewhere with free Wi-Fi, or they have to go back home before they can connect. So that's obviously much more limited. And so what we see is there's been this growth and growth and growth and growth and growth. And now it's about 400 billion, that's B for Bertie, billion people accessing the internet via a smartphone around the world. And there are about 7.5 million people, which is where we get the red line, which is roughly speaking percentage of people. So it's per 100 inhabitants. It doesn't account for the fact that some people have 2 devices, of course, but that's up approaching 60% of the world now have a smartphone connected to mobile broadband. That makes them very accessible for all sorts of research. But there's not a single global picture. The blue line is what's happening in the developed world. And active mobile broadband subscriptions are approaching 100 per inhabitants. So we looked at the picture in the United States. Of course, there are many countries who are way, way ahead. The Singapores, the South Koreas, and these sorts of countries, smaller population size. But in the developed countries, we're seeing a lot of accessible smartphone communities. The reddish sort of orange line in the middle, that's the world picture, because the developing countries are behind that, approaching 40%. And the less developed countries, the LDCs, it's around 20% have access by a smartphone. So if you want to do a study in India of people who buy BMWs, absolutely no problem. They will have a smartphone and a connection to the internet. You want to do a study in India about people who buy soap, you will miss 80% of the people who buy soap. Really big problem. However, in most of those lower developing countries or slower developing countries, there are more people with a smartphone than there are with a PC or a laptop. So bear that in mind too as we move forward. So the mobile picture in 2018, the future is all smartphone. We are not going to be using PCs in the future for anything except special cases. And in many cases, the present is smartphone. In many countries, more people are using smartphones than PCs and laptops. We have them with us more of the time. And even in the US, we've seen that the figure has now tripped over and there are more people accessible with a smartphone than a PC. But think about who you miss with smartphones. So that top 20% of the United States. But also remember, there is no technique that reaches everybody. You can't go and knock on every door. You can't mail anybody a letter. You cannot phone everybody. There are always people who can't be reached, and we look at that. When we're thinking about the developed countries, marginal mobile internet usage is almost free. What I mean by that is that if we ask you to upload a photo, we'd have to be really unlucky for that to cost you any money. It has to be right on the border of your package and your buffer and your quota for this month before it actually costs you any money. That is not true in places like Africa. Often you need to take into account, am I going to cost people money when I use the smartphone? In developed countries, there are now relatively few internet-free zones. And why that is interesting is that we thought that the future of smartphones was mostly going to be about apps. And apps have actually become a much smaller part of research than many of us thought they would. And one of the benefits of an app is I can use an app even if the internet isn't available. But you know what? Nearly all the time in the UK, in the United States, in France, in Australia, in the places I go to, the internet works. Yeah, sure, it doesn't work if I climb a mountain, but I don't do that much of the time. So the internet is relatively cheap, almost always available. So what about communities? in 2018? Well, what we're seeing from the GRIT study year after year is that online communities are bigger than any other new research technique out there. Something like $3 or $4 billion worth of research is being conducted in and around online communities. We have long-term communities, some of them now going on for 10 or 12 years, and we have short-term communities. I've seen them as short as 3 days. It's not unusual for 1 week, 2 weeks. We are seeing communities of customers, communities of employees, citizens communities as a form of democracy, stakeholder communities. We're seeing DIY, assisted serve, full service, lots and lots of different models out there. Increasingly, people are aiming to use those via mobile, but even faster, members of those communities are using their mobiles, even when the interface isn't great. If you look at the data, which is collected from what device was used and what screen device was used, you'll see a lot of mobile. And the trend in online communities is towards mobile only, or mobile assumption. So this brings up a change in the way we do surveys, mobile first surveys. So in the days of PCs, surveys got larger and they got more complex. So we would route people between different options. We would do a quite complicated conjoint. We would have an interactive screen. We would do image-based research where you could turn the page, where you could highlight things on the page, where you could do lots and lots of interactive dragging and dropping, and we got visual questions. We did know that it meant that you did most of the surveys in people's homes or in their office. Cyberloafing is the term that's sometimes used because a lot of surveys with the general population seem to be conducted in work time by people who have employment. And overwhelmingly, there are some alternatives, but overwhelmingly, the way we triggered those surveys was by sending an email invitation. That is changing in the mobile first world. So the first is the surveys have to be shorter. They have to be shorter for two reasons. The first is the same survey normally takes longer when you do it on your smartphone compared with when you do it on the PC. The second is you can read fewer things, so there's less room for instructions. It needs to be simple, it needs to be straightforward. So we've moved away from graphical interfaces to a large extent to back towards more text-based things. Now we will see some drift back to images. I've seen some really nice things with bullseyes where you click on the bullseye and how far out from the center are you, and things like that. But fundamentally, we are not going to go down the route that a large PC screen was offering of really, really fun graphical interfaces. And where we do have an image, it needs to be relatively simple, not too long to load, not too hungry of space. But we're collecting photos, we're collecting voice, and we're collecting video. We are collecting so many photos and videos that the pressure is really on how we're going to store them, how we're going to process them. And that is where some really great breakthroughs are being made. We're collecting passive data. So where were you when you took the survey? What else was running on the device? We're doing more and more collaborative research where we ask people to take part. Go out with your smartphone and find the answer to this. Investigate this for me. And sorry, very occasionally the computer loses focus and it takes me a moment just to get control back. And we've gone away from home or office space to anywhere, anytime, any place, which was an advertising jingle many years ago for an alcoholic drink. But now it's true of where we conduct research. Anywhere, anytime, any place. Really changes the options available to us. We can also send push notifications, so we can cause the survey to trigger, and we can use a much wider range of messaging. We can use WhatsApp and WeChat and Snapchat and Facebook messaging and all of these sorts of options as additional channels to communicate with people. So what happens when we put those together, communities and mobile first? Well, we're going to start using more push notification and apps. If you've got a long-term community, what a wonderful opportunity to get someone to download a wrapper app so that it can use beacons, time of day, activity-based. We can find out what your community uses for their messaging, and that might be WhatsApp, it might be WeChat, link into that. We're going to capture a lot more voice, images, and video. And because we have an ongoing relationship in a community, we're going to handle some of those tricky little permission things, which are getting everybody excited at the moment. Background variables, the locations. With the apps, we can get a lot more information, battery levels, services, etc. One of the key things about using a community is we don't ask things we already know. So the more things we learn passively, interactively, collaboratively, the shorter we can make all the tasks going forward. We can go beyond surveys, and this is a nice example of augmented reality where you can see things in addition to what is already there. So photos, video, games, voice, messaging, all of these things are really taking off in a big way. But also, so is non-conscious, so facial coding. There are people now who have got tools around where you get people to collect the selfie, they're talking to the phone, and you can do analysis. Analysis of the voice is a growing area. Information about location. To what extent are people moving during their day? We can collect information from that. Device usage. It's harder with iPhones, it has to be said. It's much easier if you work in a country where Android-based phones are much more common. But think about how you're going to manage your communities. All aspects need to be mobile first. All invitations to join the community need to be mobile friendly. The registration and sign up page, mobile friendly. Make sure you collect phone numbers. I still see people creating communities. They know that people are using their phone and they've not collected phone numbers. Get phone and preferences, earliest time of day that you can call them, latest time. Can I send you this message via SMS? Can I send it via Messenger? Can I phone you with voice? What time zone are you in? And then a really easy method for people to say, I've changed time zone. I'm now on the East Coast. Please don't ring me at the same time you used to read me. Bake in methods of updating changes. Think about how somebody is going to say, I've got a new phone, this is my phone. Maybe you could partly do that by recognition, because every time you communicate with them, you will see what phone there is. You could run a background check using SQL or something like that in the background that just checks, was the latest phone we use for that person the same as the phone we have on register? If not, we can adapt it. New phone number. Backup phone number, backup email address. Just think about all those things that you're doing with your bank, that you're doing with Google. You need to be able to do them as part of your mobile community management as well. Think about what you can really do. So with photos, you don't just have to do like really simple pictures. We can integrate them right into the research project. And this on the right-hand side is it's from the book we wrote. It's a study by MMR. They were asking people about breakfast cereals, and they didn't believe the numbers they were getting. So they asked people to take lots of photographs of the breakfast cereals they had in their home, and they then got an intern to go through and count and code, and they got a much more accurate picture. They didn't get a top-of-mind recall. They actually got a good representation of what was there. Asking people where they hang their clothes. How do you stack the dishwasher? We know that people have real disagreements about how the dishwashers are stacked. What a beautiful way just to get some simple pictures. How does it start? How does it finish? Brands of shampoo in the bathroom. What tools have you got in your car? Just take them out and photograph them. What's in your shopping bag, what's in your handbag. Lots and lots of insights we can gather. We can then take that, if you've got a long-term community, one of the biggest things that I'm seeing going on is longitudinal analysis. So asking people, what are they wearing today? But we repeat that. What is in your refrigerator? How does what is in your refrigerator change during the year and over time? How do the number of shampoos in your home change over time? The tools in your car, again, we're going to take them out, we're going to photograph them. What's in your shopping bag? What's in your handbag? Just do that every 3 months, run that for a few years, and you're really going to start picking up on some changes. You're going to see some trends, things that are appearing in the handbag, things that are disappearing in the handbag, things which are in the fridge or the refrigerator that have been opened, things which have not been opened. One of the fascinating things when you follow people who ask for things like bread makers is ask them to take a picture of where it is stored now. Things that have got a good future in the home are stored on the bench, they're stored easy accessible. If it's in another room, if it's in the back of a cupboard, well, it's a pretty dead product. And that's quite a warning, something that you need to look into, you need to follow through. One of the most fascinating things that's going on in market research are pathways to purchase. And smartphones and communities are really good at understanding this. So getting people to take photographs, do surveys, collect passive data, videos on a shopping trip. How was it that people bought those products? And then get them to go through the products afterwards, look at the photos. And then because it's a community, you could send them a really simple question. It could be a text question. You could invite them into a discussion group to find out, okay, you bought more cheese. What caused you to buy the cheese? Oh, it was 2 for 1. Or I saw it and it was a great offer. Or I saw the nachos and I thought, yes, let's have some cheese. So we could start to understand the pathways that go through that process. The whole of the in-store experience, getting people to take a photograph of things that really annoy them, things that made them smile, things they stopped and looked at. Anytime somebody goes on a trip, collect a diary of what goes on, the pictures, the treatments. Treatment pathways. So quite a lot of the work I do is around the farmer area. We want to know, how did somebody experience the whole process of going to the doctor and becoming diagnosed? So we have treatment pathways and we have patient pathways, and we want to follow those through. Quite often, if it's something serious or they're having to change their drug regime, getting them to talk to the camera and say, well, yeah, I'm really worried about, do I take this now before? Can I have a drink of alcohol with this? And so on. Things like car buying a new home, a mortgage, they take time. So getting people to do an elongated diary, survey, video, whatever, so that you find out what are the dead ends, what things didn't happen and why didn't they happen, because that's what you need to create these pathways to purchase. I mentioned video diaries. Think about how you can use them, but you also think about how much hard work they're going to be for people. So it's quite reasonable to say, okay, I want you to do this super short survey, or I want you to take a photo of every drink you drink within a 24-hour period. But you wouldn't say, I want to do that for every drink this week. That would be too much work. They would start to miss things. So we think about the work. Every lunch for a week, yeah, that's absolutely fine. The process of buying a home, well, there are many, many days when nothing happens on the home buying front. Planning for Thanksgiving, it's a bit of a rush running up to it. Don't expect to collect much data during Thanksgiving. There are better things to do, by and large, than collecting data. But maybe you could ask people just to look at the photos they took afterwards and to select a collage that described what Thanksgiving was like. House maintenance, so here's what I looked at, here's what I saw, here's where I went to buy things, I went to Lowe's, I got these products, here is how I used them, this is what it looked like afterwards, and this is why I called a tradesman in to come and fix it in my case. The selfies and videos. One of the strange things that's happened is one of the brands out there has become so successful that lots of people think Vox Pop is actually a term they've coined, but actually vox pop is a really old term, vox populari, and mostly it used to be TV cameras, and then it was booths in malls. But now, of course, it's the selfie from the iPad or from the smartphone. Fantastic source of feedback, links to facial coding, links to voice analytics, self-interviews. Also, you can get people to interview somebody else in the house. So you might get a mum to interview her children. You might get somebody to interview a work colleague. Make sure you cover all the permissions, things like that. It can be a really rich source of information. And of course, when you come to the storytelling, maybe it's the surveys and it's the trade-offs and it's the analyses that helps you find the real story in the data. That's what gives you the numerical proof. But it can be the video and the selfie that convinces senior management that this is what they should do. One of the really fun things, and there's a lot of people out doing this now, are various forms of what I call sleuthing, where you ask people to go and look at something. So, okay, what's changing in gyms these days? We want you to be a trend spotter or cool hunting. Tell us about the experiences you have. What have you changed? Competitors. I remember one of the projects that we set up many, many years ago now, we asked people to let us know about everything new that happened in the bread aisle in their supermarkets, because we wanted to know what people were noticing. To some extent, from scanner data, we could tell what was on shelves, but we couldn't tell what was being noticed. And by asking people to look around them, then collect quite short amount of data. You could even get them just to SMS it or to take a photo, and then enrich that with a bit more of a diary entry later. That's great. If you get people to say, which advertising around Twitter have you seen is really good? And when that happened, this generated this ad for a London beer. Nice bit of photography, very iconic, near Battersea in London, brand very front on the top. It kind of looks really refreshing because obviously the beer has just been drunk. This is picked up and it's passed on. And these are the sorts of clues we can get if we ask people to really collaborate with us and go out sleuthing. Which takes us to smartphone ethnography. Now, there's a bit of a language problem to get over here because different people mean very different things by ethnography. At one end, we'd have the academics who would say, well, to do an ethnography, you spend about a year doing the literature review and designing the project. Then you'll spend about 1 year collecting the data, living with people, hanging out with people, and then you'll spend 2 years writing up that ethnography as a deep, thorough, thick analysis of what you've seen. That clearly is not what we do in the market research world. Sometimes we approximate to it. Other times we're asking people to collect lots of photographs, send them to us, and we will interpret those. Really, we might call that ethnographic trace data, but you'll see these terms used very interchangeably. So when somebody says they want to do a smartphone ethnography, have a chat with them. Do they want to collect diaries? Do they want collections of images, videos of activities? Do they want people to focus on themselves, autoethnography, or on other people, so collaborative ethnography or collaborative anthropology? Make the tasks really clear and engaging for the people who are going to be collecting the data, your members of your community. Not too onerous, so 1 or 2 tasks per day, or lots of tasks but only 1 day, or 1 day a week for 4 weeks, quite a large task. Think about how you're going to process the information. So you're going to have to limit the video length at the moment, and the number of photos and the complexity of the passive data. Because what happens at the moment is most of that complexity is really simplified. So we may have the exact route that somebody took to go shopping. What we often reduce it to is how many miles and how many minutes, and how many things we might, if we're a bit cleverer, how many shops did you go past on the shop that you were going to? But that would be relatively advanced at the moment. All of that is going to change. Over the next 5 to 10 years, we are going to collect more and more complex data because we will be able to process it with better and better AI, and visual tools. Collaborative qual. So ask people to suggest topics within your community and methods. So smartphone ethnography is one type of collaborative, but your community may come up with other ideas. So you're asking them to do trend spotting, call hunting. Ask them what they've done with other projects they've worked on. They've not signed an NDA in terms of methodology, so a lot of people who are in communities will have been in other people's communities too. Ask them if they know a way of doing it. Ask them to solve problems and come up with suggestions. So you might say to people, I wonder how many people drink cappuccino on the way to work. And you may get some wonderful ideas back from people, quite innovative. You may find somebody says, oh, well, I know the people who stock the cups, and what they have told me is da, da, da. So don't necessarily think you always have to suggest a method. Leave it open for the people in your communities, because there's a sort of a great saying about the internet. There are more smart people outside your organization than inside them. So armed with a smartphone and armed with smart members of your online community, don't think you always have to tell them how to do everything. So just want to highlight one of the challenges now to be aware of, because not everything works out the way that you expect. And I was at a great conference last year with some fantastic presentations, mostly from academics and social researchers. The ESRA, European Survey Research Association. And this was from 2 German researchers. And there's a long-standing study in Germany, like there is in many countries, to understand journeys. The government needs to understand journeys, the bus companies need to understand journeys, the train companies need to understand journeys. And traditionally, people enter their journeys from memory into the PC. And they thought, wait a minute, we can use the smartphone, because the smartphone will tell us every time somebody makes the journey. So nobody's ever going to forget. And then we can just ask them, okay, what sort of journey it was. And we can tell if they've gone 60 miles an hour, it wasn't a bicycle ride. But we can do a few other bits and pieces, ask them some questions, and this is going to be great. And when they got the data at the end of the first quarter, the number of journeys per person had reduced. Now, this was completely counterintuitive to them, because their expectation was that people would forget on the old system to sometimes record them. And now they have this system which was going to automatically record them. But under German law, the app had to turn itself off if the battery hit 20% left, because you couldn't leave people in a situation where they weren't able to make their emergency calls and their social calls and so on. And it turns out a lot of people's phone hit 20% of battery left a lot of the time. So all of a sudden they had a compound problem, which they're now going away to look at to decide the best way of solving it. So something which looked like it was going to give us better data didn't quite give us what we thought it was going to do. So what is the big picture? First of all, it's all about smartphones. Don't make any plans for forward increase in the use of laptops and PCs. The days of laptops and PCs are coming to an end. Mobile first is the key paradigm. Not mobile friendly, not mobile possible. Really think about starting off your assumptions with people are going to use a smartphone. How can I design all of my research around that? We want to make sure that we've got location liberation. So how can people do it anywhere, anytime, any place? How can we make sure that it's relevant to people through using the smartphone? Video apps are an enormous area of growth. They're probably the fastest growing of the smaller techniques. More and more of them are coming forward, and I'm sure you'll hear more about them from Dan. Key trends: passive, non-conscious, collaborative, and longitudinal. If you've got long-term communities, make sure you're turning that long-termness into real value. So I'd like to say thank you very much, and hand control back to Dan.
Great, thank you, Ray. Yeah, that was great. And just a reminder to everybody, please submit your questions. In about probably 5 to 10 minutes, we'll open it up for Q&A. So there's questions coming in, but don't miss a chance to get your questions answered here. So great, thank you, Ray, for that. Well, I wanted to touch on a few things that QuestionPro is thinking about in terms of mobile first surveys and also just being more mobile friendly in terms of QuestionPro Communities app. So about a year ago, we took under the development of a brand new Communities app, and it's worked wonderfully. We have a lot of key features that I want to share with you, and then a few of the different study types that have worked well. And Ray touched on a few of these with mobile diaries, and then geolocation surveys is something that we're seeing, continuing to increase, but definitely the mobile diaries, and we'll dive more into this, but as Ray was mentioning, the ability to do the smartphone ethnography, the pathways to purchase. I think all of this really centers around, being able to have the app and the convenience of taking a picture or video, or even uploading an audio file, and having the community, be able to rally behind the app as a focal point is definitely been a key. So some of the key features in the Communities app that we have are a user activity feed, and this is great for both engagement and for the community member to see what's going on in the community, any new activities that are available to them. Sending messages directly to the phone via push or also in the app is really handy to get a hold of participants to let them know about new studies, different things you want them to do within a study, or even new survey opportunities that are available. I think it's, we all know in the research world it can be hard to reach people at times, but them having the app definitely helps with being able to reach them. The points leaderboard and levels and gamification all kind of play into the how are we going to incentivize them? What are we going to do to have people participate in the community over a longer term, and then also in more of a short-term fashion, maybe for particular studies. The ability to redeem rewards is also there, and then qualitative modules like ideation, the topics online form, and then having discussion board as well. So the new community app features a user feed, a leaderboard, the discussions. Here's some screenshots of the app here. You'll see the one on the far right-hand side is more of a discussion. You can see much like you would have like a group chat in a group text message or in WhatsApp, whatever it might be. You can have these same sort of discussions, but on a mobile basis. It's good for quick studies, or even longer-term discussions. I've seen work well because people are so used to texting and chatting in their phone via the different applications that they have now. So we've definitely seen mobile communities and this app be on the rise with the advent of mobile first approaches, and people really wanted to be mobile first in their communities. One of the, Ray touched on this, but inside of our Communities app, you can easily recruit your members from a community to participate in a particular study. And the range of uses is great, from media to finance to food. Other product testing can be done. We've seen a range of it from, consumer packaged goods to even services like people going into a bank and rating their service there. Respondents can post photos or videos and let you know their experience with the product. So much more rich feedback, I think, that you're getting. And you can even, as Ray was saying, you can supplement this with, you can still have your survey data, supplement it with, some good qualitative data with photos and videos that you can use to help augment your research. And then, turn research into really fun activities rather than survey questions. I think, we're seeing this as well, where people want to engage in the research and have some fun and while they're giving you insights. So the more that we can do that via, taking pictures, photos, video, I think will definitely help out the quality of the data that that clients and people are getting in return. One of the biggest things I think that we've seen recently is the rise of geolocation surveys. And this is really made possible via the app. So using the mobile phone's GPS, surveys can be triggered when a member crosses a geofence. Now this geofence can be defined by a certain radius around a latitude and longitude point. It can be specific shape files via KMZ or KML files that get uploaded, and then when they cross a specific boundary, then either a survey can be pushed that can or that action can be noted in the data. So you have, hey, how often were these people entering the store? And you can, just passively record that. So it's used in a variety of studies, from ad recall, in-store customer satisfaction, to exit polling. I think the uses here are really, varying. We've seen it definitely in ad recall and exit polling, along with the customer satisfaction. So a number of uses there, but these are some of the, I think, that really the common use cases that we're seeing in people wanting a mobile community. And then also just the fact that people have these longer term communities, but they want to give their members more access or more accessibility to the community. And the app is a great way to do it. It becomes more top of mind, and the push notification feature is definitely good for not only alerting new surveys and then having them take the survey in the app, but also just letting them know about upcoming opportunities, certain things they might want to do in a particular study. So with that, I want to thank you, and we'll turn it over to the Q&A, and we've got some great questions coming in. Ray, one of the first questions that came up was, we talk a lot about the different approaches and the different methodologies, but what's most exciting to you in terms of the advancements, or what do you see, coming, and then what's most exciting to you and why?
What is most exciting is what we can do with the data. So the changes in being able to process photos automatically, of being able to analyze video automatically, looking at the semiotics of the languages that people are using. Because at the moment, we've got this fantastic tool with smartphones, but we ask people to take a 15-second video or a 30-second video because processing it is so hard. But that is beginning to crack. We've got a lot of companies out there now who are working on these tools, better automated processing, better tagging, better analysis. And that is really going to open up, and that's going to move us towards more open-ended questions, away from survey questions. And I think of everything, that is the most exciting.
Gotcha. That makes sense. And then another question came in about around understanding and correctly interpreting context. That's essential. They brought up an example: if forecasted, storm is coming, it would explain, the frantic grocery store shopping and the food flying off the shelf. But can collaborative qual provide, reliable context here?
I think it can, but it's going to take a while for us to get our head around the best ways to do it. And we need to be smarter sometimes about the questions. I remember running a study for a British retailer, and it was pretty much a 2-question study. So we knew these people had shopped at the supermarket over the weekend, and we said, how good was the experience on the 0 to 10 scale? And then why did you say that? And we looked at all the data for people who said it was terrible and why they said it was terrible. And the most common reasons were things like, I had a headache, or it was raining. It wasn't actually anything to do with the store. So knowing the context can help you make a better use of that data, because you can pretty much ignore those low scores if it's not to do with the store. So maybe we want to be thinking about, how do we gather information about the person along the lines of, has it been a good day or a bad day? Some of the biometrics feedback in the future we could be looking at. So some of those will be questions, but some of them could be picked up passively as well, to give us more context. So that side of context is really important. The other good news about context is that for some questions, it's not that big a driver. So if I want to ask you, do you prefer this beer or that beer, except when you're in a bar drinking, I get pretty much the same questions wherever you are, because we did worry that, oh, right, you might be walking past a poster, a billboard. You might be watching a TV program and just see an advert for it. But actually, when people have looked at the data, it has to be a really strong context before it changes your ratings about things you believe, things you want, and so on. So that's some good news about context too.
Good. And then I think we have time for one more question here. And this is goes back to, I think, the mobile first surveys. And, we were saying that, the large complex surveys, traditionally done on laptop or PC, you see slowly fading away, and the rise of mobile first, short, simple surveys is rising. What do you say, or what can someone take away that they need to still ask some of those larger complex surveys, like if they're doing, a conjoint or max diff study, that, or even a more of a harder, more complex survey, they still need to ask that survey. What recommendations do you have if they still need to do that in regard, even though that there are still these, short-term mobile first approaches that they need to keep in mind?
Yeah, you need to think about whether or not you really do need to ask it that way. So if we take something like a conjoint or a max diff, then maybe putting 3 options on the screen, that is reasonable. Which of these 3 swipe? I've seen some nice work where people have swiped the ones they like, left and right, and so on. So sometimes you can get at it those sorts of ways, using things which are in the literature to do with partial profile designs and hierarchical bays, moving that way. But if you're telling me that we have 20 attributes by 30 items and we need to get the whole matrix, then actually we're going to have to come up with a new solution, because for a few more years, there will be people who've got a computer at home who have signed up to join one of the big online access panels, and you can research them. But those people will get less and less like the public. They're doing already 100 to 200 surveys a year. The public doesn't use a PC. They do use a PC. You're showing different sorts of images. And so that is going to be a dead end. So you don't have to stop overnight, but you have to realize that those large complex surveys are not going to be available to us unless tablets continue to take off. Maybe in 10 years they will be the saving grace, because of course tablets have got great definition, good quality print, and you can do a lot of stuff on those, and dragging and moving is really natural.
Right. Okay, no, I think that's definitely great advice. Well, I think that's all the time we have today. If you didn't get your question answered, we will be sure to follow up via email and answer your question. I just want to put up here that, you can definitely reach out to us if you have questions about communities. There are different ways to get more information. QuestionPro.com/communities has a lot of information. At QuestionPro, communities at QuestionPro.com. You can also email us. If you want to email Ray and ask him a few questions, his email address is there, raypoynter@thefutureplace.com. My personal email address is there, or at least my one for work, not my personal one. But you can definitely reach me there, although my work feels more like my personal one these days, but that's okay. There's really no difference. But you can also reach out to us. I know Ray and I are both pretty active on LinkedIn and Twitter as well, so feel free to follow us and get more information there. Ray, I want to thank you for your time and giving us your insights and knowledge in this space. We really appreciate it.
Pleasure.
Great. And thanks everyone for attending. Again, the presentation, the video recording, and the link to the slide deck will be coming shortly after this webinar. All right. Thanks everyone. Have a great rest of your day. Thank you.